And I remember shouting to them at the time, like, this is the best thing ever. I'm never going back to rowing. No word of a lie, I have not stepped foot back in a boat since that day.
No.
Not
Oh
since
my
that day.
goodness.
I've got three different things going on, which makes it a little bit complicated. So at the age of 11, I developed a brain condition. Essentially, what it means is cerebral spinal fluid we have around the brain, I developed too much of that. And so my brain starts to swell and get compressed by all the pressure within my skull. And so it really took competing away. I was kind of having seizures on one end, but I also had my body was effectively attacking itself too. And I couldn't leave the house for a good period of time.
Hello and welcome to a new year of the Toughest Finish Line podcast with me, Jen Doan. I'm so excited to be starting the year of 2026 and look forward to seeing just where this year takes us. We have some super fun things coming up, including a live version of the podcast at the World Triathlon Expo in the UK on the 28th of March. If you're able to get to London, I would absolutely love to see you there. We're going to start this year with an episode sharing the story of someone who was on a career path as a professional athlete. However, medical and neurological difficulties meant his career plan had to take a different route. So welcome to the show, Sean Mcintosh. So Sean, I got to know you through the TriDoc Coaches platform, and we also recently did TriDoc Pool School together as coaches. And I think one of the things that struck me about you was just how knowledgeable you are as a coach, but also as a very talented athlete. And the more I've got to know you, I've learned things about your conditions that you have, such as epilepsy, which we're going to go into a lot more detail over the show. But the more I spoke to you, I thought this is going to be perfect for the podcast and such an inspiration. So thank you so much for being here today, Sean. And we're going to start, if that's okay, just with where your journey in sport and fitness started. Because is it right? It was in rowing. Is that how you got started?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I know we've been trying to get on for a little while, so I'm quite glad I managed to finally pin some time down for you. And thank you for the high esteem. I'll try to follow up for you. Yeah, I mean, on a sporting front, I think I've always been involved in sport at some level from a really young age. I was very fortunate that my parents and just my surrounding growing up in Anglesey, I think it's a fairly active area. So I was involved in, all the school sports as you would be, football, rugby. I did boxing for a while, and my first kind of calling, if you like, yeah, it was rowing, and I rowed for a few years at a international level, and we did really well there. And there was something about it. I think, we often talk in sport about talent versus work ethic. And in sport in general, I've never really been one who's talented, but I've got the work ethic. Rowing was a little bit different, where it was the one sport that I've ever done where I actually sat in the boat, and the first time, like, I was just at one with the water, and I didn't have to be taught all the basics of like stroke rate, timing, rhythm within a stroke, how to scull properly, how to engage your catch, these things, which most people go through a real learning process with that. And I still to this day don't know what it was, but I just took to it easily. My father was a fisherman and that, and so it could have just been that I was brought up on the water and driving boats, and I had an understanding of the sea and water from a young age. But it just kind of it fell naturally to me, and I had an amazing community around me as well from a young age, and a lot of people who were almost like maternal and paternal figures within rowing, because I was a junior and there was a lot of adults around me. They really just took care of me and kind of took me under their wings, and it went from there. It grew from there.
Amazing. And so you mentioned that you were at an international level there, Sean. Where did you get to? What races were you doing?
Yeah, I was really lucky that we got to race all over. So I started in something a little bit different. It's called Celtic sea rowing. They were the boats we used to use. They're called Celtic longboats. And I did a little bit of sculling. And over time that progressed as I kind of got to the age of sixth form, if you like, in school. So 16 through to 18, I started doing a little bit more of the river sculling and doing stuff with Chester Rowing Club. That was the nearest big club to me at the time. We did have Bangor University Club, but obviously I wasn't in university yet. So occasionally they would let me train with them, particularly as I kind of became more known and was competing at a higher level. They kind of wanted me to come then, but in the early days, I traveled over to Chester and honestly, we competed all over. So we had different seasons. I stayed with the rowing club that I was with back home, and I did their season, which was all Celtic Sea rowing. But I would also then it would alternate in weeks. So their races were every 2 weeks, and then the British season into the European season were every 2 weeks as well. And it happened for me that it fell really nicely that the 2 weeks alternating was like river and sculling, and then it was sea rowing the opposite week, and I just fluctuated between the two of them. From it's all to do with the season runs with daylight, so as daylight saving starts, that's when the season starts for rowing effectively. And so from that period, end of March, start of April, right through to the end of September, was just every weekend, back to back, racing, racing, racing. And then we would train. We were on the water most days of the week. To be honest with you, Saturday was usually the only day that we weren't on the water. Um, and yeah, I fell in love with it. I got to travel all over the country and across Europe with it. We got to do some great races all the way from, 2K scull and indoor rowing on the concepts in the winter through to sea rowing over in across Europe and Greece and places like that, and doing like river marathons down in London. It was I was really fortunate to have that introduction, I think, into endurance sport and just a really supportive environment.
And, I think it's one of the things that I've seen from the little amount of time that I've got to know you, but it's just how committed you are to something, and it's so committed to be able to be training every single day. It just shows that it was really a passion for you. And so, what made you switch to the world of triathlon? Where did that come about? Because you're racing at an international level, clearly very good at what you're doing and loving it. What made you take that switch?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and you've segued quite nicely into that. The thing that took me away from rowing was my work ethic and accountability side of things.
Okay.
Something I really struggled with was the team environment of sport and being reliant on other people for your results and success. I really struggled with that. In the beginning, I loved it, and I loved it when we had a team who were all on that same page. But when you get into the university side of things and those, years where your teammates are discovering drinking and relationships and all these other avenues and
Yeah.
chasing, careers and that balance of, hey, like I need to get a real job, I found more and more that I was turning up in the best condition I could be in the crew. And you would maybe see two or three people who were hungover or hadn't really trained for a couple of weeks because they just didn't feel like it. And at such a high level, I struggled with that. And so
Yeah.
I'd been looking around for just some things to do that excited me. And something that popped up was an Olympic rower called James Cracknell did the triathlon across America. And he said one of the hardest things he'd ever done was an Ironman. And being a little bit arrogant and not knowing anything about it, I was like, oh, well, that's easy. I come from rowing. I can handle anything. Like nobody's going to touch me. And so I signed up to a local race called the Slate Man over in North Wales as my first event. And I trained through the off season. At the time, the race was in early May.
Right.
So it was like 6-degree water temp for the swim. You know, it was raining, blustery winds, and everything on the mountain passes and what have you on the bike. And it was a fell run for the run section of things. And it just really appealed to me. I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. I was a little bit arrogant. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll probably be right up there. Little did I know, I wasn't at all. I wasn't at the back, but I was kind of in the middle of the race. From an age group perspective, I think actually I did quite well. But I remember distinctly, there's this one section I tell people about, and you had to go over this pass in North Wales, and then you turn around and you come back over it from the other side and descend. And as I was descending on the way down, there was a friend of mine marshalling the event. And I remember shouting to them at the time, like, this is the best thing ever. I'm never going back to rowing. And no word of a lie, I have not stepped foot back in a boat since that day.
No.
Not
Oh
since
my
that day.
goodness.
I had all sorts of offers, kind of looking at doing rowing under a scholarship and what have you, going to university. And I was well in with my applications. I'm waiting for results and stuff. And I left it off. I didn't go back to it. And it's funny because I didn't dislike rowing either. I absolutely loved it. I loved the community and all my friends and everything. But it was just this, it's cliche, but it was almost a calling. I just knew that that's where I need to be and what I want to be doing. And, touch wood to this day, we're 12 years down the line and my whole career revolves around it. So it was definitely the right decision. The competing side, we'll probably touch on in a bit, but that kind of ebbs and flows along the way. But yeah, very, very much the right decision, isn't it? I can't say there's any regrets. I occasionally miss being in the water, and
Yeah.
I kind of get my fix from doing a little bit of rowing in terms of just in my training on a rower and that now. But I can't see me going back anytime soon, put it like that.
Wow. I mean, that's just crazy how you can have something that's literally your whole life. And as you said, you were training every single day for it. And then just boom, one event and it's completely changed your whole life.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I think, again, we'll probably touch on it, but I'm neurodiverse and I didn't know this at the time. And I suspect for me it was very black and white, that adrenaline rush and the thrill I got from doing it and that accountability. I think it just hooked me. It's my drug, so to speak. That's my addiction, and there's worse addictions to have, right?
Absolutely. And I say exactly the same thing as, yeah, I got into it and it is, that fix it gives you, that high that it gives you is definitely a big reason why you keep going back and you keep doing it. So, wow. Okay. So I hadn't realized that just that changed just that
Yeah,
quickly. It's amazing. And so what age was that, Sean?
that would have been 17 going on 18. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people say they got into sport early, and yes, you were in sport, but it just shows that even later in life you can go on a new path, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's an interesting one because although I say the race, wasn't anything special by most people's standards, and people I work with and coaching that they'd have been thrilled with it. Like I think it was still an age group when I was just middle of the pack because there wasn't many in my age group at the time when I was doing it. I think it was still in its infancy a little bit in terms of it certainly didn't have the boom that it has now. It's blown up the sport a lot more. But yeah, I never went back to it. And that's funny. I've got a bit of a change at the moment. There's some big goals this year which don't include triathlon for the first time in 10 years, which I'm really excited about. But I was very fortunate. I think my first year, I did go pro in my first year, and I was, I had great success on the national series. I think I won every race of every distance that year within the national series. And yeah, unfortunately, I had some health issues then kind of came up from there, and it changed the trajectory a little bit.
Yeah. So we're going to come on to one, your epic plan for next year, but also your medical conditions as well. I want to speak about, but I just want to touch on what you were just talking about. So, because you fell into triathlon, but you smashed it. You very quickly became pro. And so, what distance was that in terms of triathlon? Was it all distances, or did you have a specialism?
But yeah, so at that stage, it was part of the National Development Academy, so it would have been gearing towards Commonwealth, kind of sprint and Olympic was the target. So um, it was a bit of an interesting one. Again, that wasn't your normal path. So I kind of did my first triathlon and I had my rowing background and I contacted the National Development Academy. That was in Cardiff, though, and I was based in Anglesey, so complete opposite ends of the country. And they came back to me and they're like, look, you haven't got any times. You've not come from a running background or a swim background, so we don't have anything in terms of performance assessment to base you on. So it's a hard no for the time being. And I didn't take to that really well. So I badgered them and badgered them. And they said, okay, well, if you go, if you can go to some of the national series events and just do okay. If you can place within the field, absolutely fine. And so I went to the national series events that year, and I went to the national age group series as well, and I won every single one of them for my category. In that all distances from cross duathlon to middle distance, biathlon. Long distance wasn't in the program at that point, which is probably a good thing, but long distance wasn't in there, and aquathlon too. So I had some real success And I went back to the national academies and they said no again at that point. I was like, well,
No.
I can't do anything more. What do you want me to do? And it came down to funding essentially and where I was based. I wasn't from a background where anybody could put money in for me. I didn't have any sponsors. I didn't have any links. Not that they wanted. I had everything from rowing, but not from triathlon. It's a very, closed look. And so then I approached British Triathlon instead, and they were a lot more accommodating. Just meant that I'd have to go to some of the Northwest regional stuff. Um, and it would have been Loughborough. We'll come on to that a little bit more later. But things kind of took a bit of a turn from that point. So yeah, I was very fortunate there, and it definitely gave me the bug for sure.
Yeah. And so with triathlon, we mentioned a little bit about the high you get from it, but what is it about the racing that you loved so much?
Um, it's an interesting one, and I think I'm still figuring this out. People often joke that I'm quite experienced in that because I've been doing this for a while, but I'm still only 27, so
Yeah.
there is still a learning piece there. I think looking back at this point, and I probably wasn't aware of this at the time, but there was a lot going on in terms of suppressing sexuality and having to show like I wanted to show that I was still a man and I was masculine and I could do all these things. And there's probably people I wanted to impress around me, whether that was, friends, paternal figures, family. I didn't want my value, so to speak, to rest on my sexuality. I didn't want that to be a thing. And so I did everything I could to show that I could still be somebody. Now it's very much evolved and it's away from that, but I think that's what definitely brought me into it in the first place. The community piece kind of developed further along the line. I kind of had to create and find my own communities. And I think it was the solitude, in all honesty, the solitude of just me, myself, and I can put the work in. Nobody can take that away from me. I can show to myself maybe at the time who I was as well. I think that was a real big piece of it, and it's certainly evolved. Like I say, as I've gotten older, it's not really attached to that anymore. It is very much building a community, getting people involved into the sport, being an outlet for mental health. All these wider purposes, if you like, now. And that's great to see that I've managed to shift that. And like I say, still figuring some of it out, but I think I've certainly come a long way without perhaps realizing at the same time.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that just shows, doesn't it, just how much the sporting world, not necessarily just triathlon, but the sporting world can give you in whether it is sexuality, whether it is mental health, whatever it is, it can help in so many ways. And so you were, well, smashing it in the world of being a pro and racing and things. But is it right that you had to stop racing? And do you want to talk us through what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I'm quite an open book around it. I think depends how long we've got. So I often joke that there's a bit of a running joke in our family that we all seem to be quite physically fit, but also very ill as a family.
Right.
And I'm certainly no exception to that. So there were a few things along the way. And I have various conditions, predominantly neurological, that I've had from the age of about 11 or 12. So I've got three different things going on, which makes it a little bit complicated. So at the age of 11, I developed a brain condition. It's called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, bit of a mouthful. Essentially what it means is cerebral spinal fluid we have around the brain, I developed too much of that. And so my brain starts to swell and get compressed by all the pressure within my skull. And that can lead to a whole host of nervous system issues. I lost my eyesight at first when it was getting really bad with it. You developed brain tumors. It was quite a tough period. And so I had lumbar punctures and I've got a spinal tap in, which helps me now drain that fluid permanently. So we had that. That was kind of pre being competitive in sport though. So we thought things had settled. And then, yeah, like we say, I had some success with rowing and then transitioned into triathlon. Unfortunately, at the end of that first year of competing and doing really well, I developed epilepsy. And we're still not sure to this day. And consultants and that can't really rule it out, but we don't know if that's linked to
Was going to
the
say, is
first
that
condition.
linked to together? So not sure.
Yeah, so I developed the epilepsy, but I also developed a immune disorder at the same time. So we had the two of these going on together. And I had lymphadenopathy, which metastasized, and I had to have like lymphectomies and treatment and therapy and immunotherapy and stuff for quite a while. And so it really took competing away. I was kind of having seizures on one end, but I also had my body was effectively attacking itself too. So I couldn't I couldn't really train, and I couldn't leave the house for a good period of time. And so I kind of turned my hand to the next best thing, which to me was the coaching side of things. I always knew I wanted to be a coach, but it was always going to be the secondary. That was going to be my fallback to me. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be this elite athlete and I'm going to travel the world and, do all these things. And then when I'm in my mid to late 30s and I look at retiring from sport, I'll fall back onto that coaching then and create this coaching community. For me, that actually got flipped. So because competing was taken away from me then at that point, it was the next best thing I can do is go and coach. And so I did my first degree was in psychology and profiling with the Open University. And then as I was coming into my final year with that, I started a full-time degree at Bangor University over in North Wales as well, doing sports and exercise science, with a load of all sorts of just random certifications on the way, anything I could do. I think I definitely took that mentality from the competing into my education. So it's like, well, if I still had that competitiveness that if I was going to coach, then I also had to be the best coach at it and I had to know everything. And clearly we know now that is always evolving and you never can know everything. But at 19 years old, that was my thinking. And so I set myself at coaching and learned as much as I could and fell into some great roles with coaching very early on too. So yeah, everything works out the way it's meant to at the end of the day. I think everyone has their own battles and things they go through. And, I'm fortunate now that I'm touch wood out the other side, so to speak. I'll never be able to handle training the way that I used to, but I can handle it again at a level that is enough for me to compete again and actually set some scary goals, which is a really nice place to be. And I now have an incredible community around me and I get to work with not just our community, but coaches worldwide. And that's a wonderful place to be.
For this week's episode, we have partnered with Enator because every runner we speak to has one thing in common: resilience to help you cross that finish line. Injuries, setbacks, comebacks, it takes more than mileage to stay in the game. Enator's performance insoles use PX1 technology to absorb shock, return energy, and help you recover stronger. They're trusted by elite athletes and built for runners who don't back down. I've been wearing Enator insoles throughout my training and they have hugely helped to reduce impact during running and protect me from injury. Right now, you can get 15% off with the code ToughestFinishLine at enator.com. Back your body, keep showing up, endure more with Enator. And we're going to come on to your plan for next year in a bit. But just going back then, I mean, to be on that trajectory of I'm going to be a pro, I'm coming first in every single race, and then your health actually putting a bit of a stop to that. You mentioned how coaching massively helps you through that time, but I can imagine that was pretty tough mentally to get through. Was there anything else that you found helped you particularly, or was it that coaching that was just a crutch for you through that period?
No, I mean, the honest answer is therapy. Therapy was the thing that helped me for sure. And there was a lot of other things that unfolded during that period. And not something I ever really speak about very often, but my best friend and my training partner at the time, when I stopped training with him because I was ill, I wasn't really transparent with him, but I was ill. And unfortunately, he was going through his own stuff and he took his own life. And so at a young age again, I put that on myself because I was like, well, it's my fault. I stopped training with him. He didn't have me confide in me or any of these things. And so therapy was definitely the option for me. Therapy and coaching went hand in hand. I think I could help other people, but also that I needed the therapy to figure out my own thoughts and my own patterns. And, I worked with some different people, and CBT was a real big thing for me. And there's different forms of therapy. Talking therapy wasn't something that necessarily helped a great deal, but um, yeah, CBT was, and we tried like some R&R and stuff like that. And I just had to take my time. I had to take myself away from everything, take myself away from the noise, and just do what I needed to do for a while. Otherwise, I'd have probably spiraled myself. But I'm very fortunate that I had people around me that I needed at the time, and I recognized that I needed to get the support. I think, half of the issue with a lot of people, without going down the mental health route too much, is that they don't recognize that the support is there, and they don't know how to get the support either. And so I was very fortunate that perhaps it was, having studied psychology and that I knew it was there, but I was very fortunate at that, I think.
Yeah, and it's such a challenging one, isn't it? Because I think particularly with men, it's not discussed enough. From my experience of postnatal depression, there wasn't loads, but it was spoken about, and there were channels out there. Whereas I think definitely for men, it's getting better. But I imagine at that time, that age that you were, and particularly in the environment where you're in a competitive atmosphere, where you've just got to be on your top game all the time, that must have been quite isolating and lonely for you.
Yeah, very much so. And still something I think I probably struggle with now. I'm very much an isolated person. I do take myself away, and I do a lot of work myself, and I probably put a lot of responsibility on myself. And I'm learning to delegate. I do have a team now, and I have people around me, but it's definitely not something that comes natural for me. And like you say, yeah, I don't think it's an interesting topic. I don't think it's necessarily that men's mental health isn't talked about enough anymore. I do think there's much better, particularly in the last few years, there are much better support systems and networks out there. I think the big thing with mental health is your environment. So the help is always there, but it depends on what your environment is. Are you in the right place where you can see it as an option? And do you have the right people around you? Are they the healthiest people? And when we talk about, emotional kind of intelligence, if they're not the healthiest people for you to be around, you don't know those options are there. And there's all sorts of, you know, irrespective of gender. I think, like you say, postnatal depression is one. I'm very fortunate I work with some incredible women. And again, yes, the support is there now, but 5 or 6 years ago, I've worked with countless women who were misdiagnosed or didn't even know they had it until their children have actually grown up, and they then recognize, 5, 6, 10 years later, oh, that's what it was, that explains it. And so I think just in general, mental health needs support irrespective of genders. And I am obviously a champion for men's mental health, but I think it's important to realize that everybody needs mental health support.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was 100% my experience that I had. It was misdiagnosed, and yeah, it was a long battle. But it's great that there is, as you say, it's getting better, which is really good. And I'm so pleased that you had coaching to help you through. And it does mean that you have killer skills as a coach now, Sean. I kind of, when I was at Try Pool School with you, I was just listening to you, like learning so much as a coach myself. And you supporting us as coaches in the Try coaches community. You're always there and offering advice, which is amazing. And so one of the things I just wanted to touch base with you, we spoke a little bit when I last saw you at Pool School, and you mentioned about your training. Because you are training for a big year ahead of yourself. What are you planning next year, Sean? Shall we go there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely important to note that I have still been competing to some level the last
Mhm.
few years, but I'm only now getting to the point where my body can really handle it again. And I have worked with, various amazing coaches along the way and learned a lot from them as well as a coach. I think that's always important to note, the people that you might not necessarily work with now are still people that help build you up to where you got to. Um, and so, yeah, I've got some pretty hefty goals. I've managed to have the best part of the year now where I've been consistent, touch wood, and my body is actually responding, which is a lovely place to be. Um, and I should kind of preface this with it's okay if I don't hit these goals. I'm fully aware that they are blue sky thinking, and although the lab numbers say that I can do it, there's so much that goes into it, and also there's only so much your body can handle, and I might find that point along the way. So yeah, the goal itself, I've separated the year into three. So I have Hyrox, which is probably the dirty word in triathlon at the moment, but it's the in sport, right?
It
So
is.
my goal is to kind of go under the elite standard in three different sports. So the Hyrox elite standard in terms of time is under 60 minutes for the pro division. You have different levels of division, which kind of dictates the weight, if you like, that you use for the sport. So under 60 minutes for that. Marathon, I would love to go around the 2:30 barrier for a marathon if I can. I've been close to that in the past. So I think that one, all being well, I should be able to get there, or certainly within the ballpark. And then under 9 hours for an Ironman as well, which is the scary one. So I have to be very, very smart about how I apply things. I also have to be a little bit selfish with my time, and the my energy is a big thing. Um, and then just make sure I space them out in the right way. I think where a lot of people fall into traps when they set big goals like this is they try to do all three at once in terms of, training stimulus, and it's not really that. I think you're always better to focus on the demand and then move on to the demand of the next one, because they're all aerobic based sports. Even though Hyrox, has a high level of strength, that strength will translate into power in the back end of the marathon, strength in the back end of the marathon where you really
Of
need
course.
it. And
Yeah.
in Ironman too, running off the bike under fatigue, they do translate. And so it will be kind of a full focus for each discipline at a time. And hey, yeah, I may fall short, I may not hit all three, or I might not even hit any, but have a great day. And as long as I've applied myself to that process and I get out of it, a day that I feel I can be proud of, that's all that really matters.
Love that mentality of it's okay if we don't do this, but I'm not afraid to go and have a go and go and push myself and put myself out there.
Absolutely. There's always more races on the calendar, right? If I fail one of them, or I fail the whole task, well, I'm a big step closer than I am right now. So I'll try again the following year, and it's okay. The season seems to get longer and longer, and there's always more races to put on the calendar.
That's such a positive way of looking at it, because I think a lot of people can just focus on their one race and that becomes all consuming in their whole life, doesn't it? But it's that positive spin that, even if you don't succeed at that race, you've learned so much, haven't you? And you've pushed your body to a level that it wasn't at before that you can then use in future races. I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I've also got to remember I do have a business to run too, and athletes who depend on me, and coaches who depend on me, and they all have big goals for next year, and we have big goals as a business. We've got all sorts going on, like the Limitless initiative, for example. That's going to take a lot of time up, and it's amazing to be part of these things. So it's it's okay. Like I say, triathlon is it's a luxury at the end of the day, and there's so many other things that I can get satisfaction out of and be proud of along the way.
But such a positive way to think about it. And so I just wanted to touch on your training for these, because we've set some really great goals that we're working towards. But obviously, training with epilepsy and idiopathic intracranial hypertension and neurodiversity all in one thing. Um, I just wanted to touch on the training, because when I last saw you, you were saying about how a lot of your training you do in the night time because of your condition and things. So can you just explain to us, how do your conditions impact your training, and what have you learnt that helps you?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. I think there's different things I've learned along the way, and if I try to look at each kind of condition, if you like, as an isolation first of all, and then put them together, it's a little bit
Right.
easier. So
Okay. Yeah.
if we talk about the neurodiversity, first of all, it's understanding that I'm very black and white, and I need routine in what I do. And if it's not a routine I can stick to, which again is the same for most athletes, but I quite like repetition within that routine. I find it doesn't really work for me. On the other hand, I have to be really sensitive to that ADHD side of me that always wants more and always wants to push harder and go bigger, and be really aware that I can't always do that. Um, I I'm one of these that I kind of set big goals and go, yep, I can do that. I'll say yes to everything and do everything. Not quite the case. I'm kind of learning as I get a little bit older to be a bit more conscious of my time and my effort and where I put that energy. Um, so that's kind of the neurodiverse side of things, if you like. The epilepsy. So the epilepsy and the IIH kind of tie together in terms of they're both neurological conditions. And so what that means is it affects my peripheral and central nervous system. Problem with that is that affects absolutely everything that your
Everything.
body does. It's really hard to explain that to people. From, you know, sleep to digestion to my cognitive function, it can be really up and down on a daily basis. So you mentioned that I train in the evening. The reason I train in the evening is because my seizures are nocturnal seizures, and so I have my seizures either during my sleep or early hours of the morning. So when I wake up, my circadian rhythm is really off, and it takes me a few hours to mentally be able to get going. But that also means it takes me a few hours as well for like cortisol and stuff to drop, which normal people, when they wake up, it's because their cortisol has dropped and it's because the circadian rhythm is ready to wake up. Mine isn't. My body would quite comfortably do 12 hours of sleep a day or sleep until lunchtime every day if it could. So I have to wait for my body to wake up. I have to wait for my heart rate to drop because I wake up rather than waking up with a low heart rate. I wake up with an elevated heart rate because my cortisol levels are
Gosh.
so
Yeah,
high
yeah.
after the seizures. So I almost have to let my body recover. I try to explain to people a seizure is a little bit like a really intense workout. All of my muscles, they tense up at once. Everything is firing. So when you're asleep and everything should be relaxed and recovering, and those muscles should be recovering and growing, mine are actually tensing and working out in my sleep. So I have to recover from that training session, if you like, and then go in the evening then. And so that's why I tend to train in the evening. And it's the same for racing. All races are usually early in the morning. I have to
Yeah.
wake up a lot earlier or almost try and put myself on a slightly different clock, if you like. So I'll wake up at 2 or 3 on the day of a race, not 4 or 5, so that I can have my 2 or 3 hours to let my body calm down, get going, get the fuel in, and then I can go into the race. If I woke up 2 or 3 hours like a normal person, it doesn't usually end very well. I tend to find that my heart rate is like through the roof from the start of the race. I can't control it, can't breathe, and I'll usually finish the race and unfortunately go and have a seizure. So I've learned to adapt things along the way, if you like. And it's just a learning curve. And that's why it's taken, 5, 6 years to figure that out. It's very complex. There is no rule book on how you deal with that, unfortunately. And when I look back now, I was told I shouldn't compete and I can't compete and it's dangerous for me to compete. So the fact that I'm competing again and I get to train every day of the week more or less is great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think you've touched on it there, but what works for you may not work for somebody else with epilepsy
No.
or with anything. But it's so inspiring seeing how you've worked out exactly how your body is and when are the best times for that training so that it doesn't stop you from doing something that you absolutely love. And I think that's so inspiring for listeners as well to know that even if you are going through these things that you can work out ways that work for you. And I imagine, have you had a team around you, Sean, who have helped you work out, or has it been all the coaching studying that you've been doing and in trial and error?
Yeah, I've had coaches I've worked with along the way, but they just really, unfortunately, they were incredible coaches in their own right. It just didn't work for
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
And even, medical professionals and my consultants and stuff, there was a good few years of going backwards and forwards, kind of what I was going, no, this is what I'm presenting, this is how I'm feeling, and then being told, no, no, it's not that, or just, get on the medication, you have to deal with it. This is what your life is now. Um, and so there was a lot of trial and error. And there's been some coaches that are really good that have actually taught me that it's okay to hold back, for example. I think that was a big thing. But on the flip side, what we find with it is when everything is good and my body is working the way I want it to work, I can handle a hell of a lot of stress. But then the next week, I can't handle stress at all. And that's not a training principle of overload thing. It's more just that's how my neurological kind of system is firing at that moment, and trying to teach coaches that I've worked with that I need them to give me the control of how much I do each week is quite hard because they don't really, it's hard to, as a coach, to understand that training stress isn't the big issue, it's neurological stress. And there's no way to really quantify neurological stress. But, you know, I speak about this with my athletes a lot. The body has no way of separating cognitive load from physical load. So stress is stress either way. For me, my body overreacts to cognitive load. But on the physical load, I can handle a hell of a lot on the physical load. And so it's really interesting for me. I kind of have to monitor how am I feeling mentally a lot more than how am I feeling physically, because it's the mental side that causes the seizures and my immune system to suppress itself and attack itself and these kind of things. So it's been a very long learning, and it has taken time to find coaches as well who also respect me as a coach to know that, hey, this guy does know enough about what he's doing to be the one
Yeah.
guiding us. We can write in the plan and keep him in check, because just like any other athlete, I do still need somebody to tell me what's realistic at times, but I need them to understand that I will tell them what my body's capable of, and then they
Yeah.
can tweak it from there.
Yeah. And only you know how your body is feeling, don't you? It's you knowing when that time is where you can be going for it, and that time when you need that recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've had a period of almost a year now where things have been really settled. I've had maybe one or two issues. My immune system at the moment is a little bit compromised, and so I am kind of dealing with that at the minute. But for me, that's the first time ever I've actually had a year of nothing. And so because I've had that consistency, I've also been able to document and play around with things a little bit more and say, oh, okay, my body doesn't like this type of session in particular, and it doesn't like it if this is kind of my limiter with sleep, of how much I have to get, and those kind of things. And that's been really useful. So I'm really excited for next year.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And how you're working it all out to be so specific for you is really, really inspiring. And I think reassurance to people that just because a doctor may have said no, you can't, or it don't let that stop you. And to tell you if there's something that you really want to do, then there are avenues that you can look at and speak to these people who are
Abs
going through similar.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big proponent of telling, coaches and athletes to stay in their lane and let the experts
Yeah,
tell them things. But
absolutely.
there is a time and place, and sometimes you do need to push back on that. One thing I have found, particularly with NHS care, is that the NHS are used to dealing with general population athletes, Ironman, rowers, high rocks athletes, whatever it is. They don't tend to fit into the general population. So also taking things with a pinch of salt and finding the right experts to guide you. So if you are putting your trust in an expert, as you should be, maybe look for a doctor who specializes in sport, for example. My doctor that I work with she's a professional ultra runner, and I trust her 100%, and that's really
Yeah.
important for me. And she's brilliant. She has a clinic here which is local to me, and they do everything for me from cardiac and vascular screening to like neurological screening and stuff for me regularly, so that I have now if there's anything that I'm ever worried about or I feel like something is out of sync, I can just go there at short notice and they will do whatever I need them to do to take care of it, and then just put me more for peace of mind more than anything. Um, but it is important to find those people and outsource to the experts.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, Sean, it's so inspiring hearing your story. I knew it was going to be an interesting one from the stuff that you said to me already, but learning all about it has been really, really inspiring and motivating for me, but I'm sure lots of other people as well. And so, not just epic year sporting wise next year, but you've mentioned you are obviously a very highly skilled coach and doing lots of coaching. And so, if people did have questions for you or wanted to find out more, how would be the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's a lot of other highly skilled coaches out there, I
Of
should
course,
add,
yeah.
but I do try to do my bit and try to keep learning as much as possible. I think, yeah, if you want to find me, I'm on quite active on social media. So I've got two accounts. So I've got one just specific to coaching and more my life and my racing. So I have just Sion-Kelly Mcintosh, and then I have Sion-Kelly Performance Coach for any kind of more specific coaching related pieces. You can find me over at TriDot with Predictive Fitness and RunDot. I'm quite often at activations and different events that we're at. And then the Precision website, of course, where all my incredible team are at. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
you. I think it's going to be, just helpful knowing that even if you've got lots of things going on, there are ways of working things out so you can do what you want to do. And so we always finish a podcast just saying that if you had one bit of advice to share with somebody who may be going through similar to you, whether that be mental health or, neurological conditions, what advice would you give them?
That's a great question. In the nicest way, I hope nobody does have to. I am grateful that I've had the upbringing that I've had and it's made me who I am, but I do hope that not many people have to go through that. Um, my best piece of advice I can give is just give yourself time, give yourself space. Everything does pass and everything does get better with time. Listen to your body. Like when you need to come off the gas and you can see that check engine light is on, come off. It's okay. The world won't stop. Everything will be okay. Um, yeah, I think that's the best bit of advice I could give anybody.
Yeah, love it. Definitely. It's just listening to that body and being really in tune and not afraid just to say, actually, I need to look at things differently or take a bit of a break, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Oh, Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And I wish you all the best for next year. I will be following your progress with how things go. Which is your first event? Is it High Rocks that you've got first?
There's a few in there. Yeah, I think I've got a
Okay.
couple of high rockers do the winter. Triathlon season starts in May. I'm sure you'll see, and I'm sure I will see you before then as well.
Yeah. Well, good luck with it all. I'm super excited for you. And yeah, we will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.